Hey nerdy knitters! In this video we're going to look at vintage knitting patterns and books. If you like vintage patterns or old knitting books, these resources are for you. I have 12 resources all together and I've split them into two sections. The first section focuses on digitized copies of books and patterns and the 6 places you can find those. And then I have 6 more places. If you prefer physical books and patterns, then there's 6 more places you can find those. Let's look at the online sources first. First on my list is antiquepatternlibrary.org. Now this has a lot of different patterns from carpentry, calligraphy, flower arranging, but there is a section for knitting. And when you click on the knitting option, you'll see a long list of PDF files that you can just click and download right to your device. There's some really nice old books and resources on here. Next on the list is openlibrary.org. Now this one has a lot of good options and you can browse by subject. And if you look at the knitting choices, there are some that are fairly recent in the 2000s, and then you'll see some in the 70s and the 60s. But there are some that are even older on there. There's lots of good options here, and if you want things that aren't so antique, then you'll find some good books that you can borrow on there. Next is archive.org. This is a nonprofit website, and when I type in knitting, I get more than 10,000 results. You'll find, like Open Library, there are some that aren't so old, quite a few from the 80s and 90s, but there's some very old gems hidden in there too that you can find. Fourth on my list is Google Books and Google Scholar. If you know the name of the book that you're looking for, you can type it in there and see if you can find a digitized version of it online. And Project Gutenberg at gutenberg.org is another really good option. They have over 60,000 books, and if you do a search, just type in the word knitting in the search bar and you'll find some great books there. The Ladies Knitting Book, Beaton's Book of Needlework from Mrs. Beaton, Handbook of Wool Knitting and Crochet, My Knitting Book, the Ladies Wool Workbook, Exercises in Knitting. There's some really good choices here. Not quite as many as the other sources, but some good selections of old digitized versions of books. Last on my list of online resources is HathiTrust.org. Now, HathiTrust is a nonprofit research and academic library that wants to preserve digitized books. So if you look on their page and you do a search for knitting, you will find some really nice old things from the 1920s, 1899, early 1900s. There's lots of good things here if you want some that are much older. And one more tip when researching these online digitized sources. If you type in knitting and you're not finding very much, use the word needlework as well. A lot of the older books, everything would have been put in one subject under that topic of needlework, crochet, knitting, embroidery. It would all be in one resource, but you would find all of those different types of needlework in there too. So do a search for needlework if you're not finding much when you look for the word knitting. Now, before we look at our next 6 sources, I just want to stop and say I believe you can be a confident knitter, but it comes with understanding what's happening on your needles. And really, you can really become a confident knitter by looking at some of these old patterns and these old books and really learning to understand knitting and how it's evolved and changed over time. If you agree, give this video a thumbs up and be sure to subscribe if you like to get nerdy with your knitting. And if you know of a resource I haven't mentioned here where you can find some vintage patterns and knitting books, be sure to leave us a comment and share with us. Now let's look at our 6 sources for finding physical books and pamphlets. The first 2 are eBay and Amazon. If you know the book you're looking for specifically, you can type them in and look on there to see if you can find physical copies of the books. With eBay, you could find a really good deal. Amazon, you have to search through the used booksellers and see the good options there. I like these other 4 sources probably better than eBay for sure. Abe Books is a good source for used books. You'll find lots of different things on there, so you'll have to sift through and look, and it's a good idea if you already know the book you're looking for, you can type it in and search for that specific book. Another place to find used books is thriftbooks.com. You'll find lots of newer books on there as well, so this is another one. If there's a specific vintage pattern book you're looking for, you'll have to type in the name and look for it. Or if you're just looking to save money on newer books, this is a really good choice. Next on the list is betterworldbooks.com. Now they have new books, but you can find specifically used books, bargain bins, clearance sale, even textbooks on here. So you can go to the used book selection and then look for knitting books. Last on my list is Alibris.com. They have a rare books section. So if you know of a particular book you're looking for, then you might be able to find it on here as well. So there you have it, 6 sources for physical books and 6 sources for digitized online books for vintage knitting patterns. Of course, you'll find lots of newer things too, but if you like vintage patterns, these are good sources to check out. If you can think of any other sources that I haven't mentioned here, be sure to leave us a comment and share it below, and be sure to subscribe if you like to get nerdy with your knitting.